Hello and welcome back to Relocate Guru. Today I'm really excited because we're going to be having a chat with Kathryn from Kathryn Relocated about handling the changes and transitions when moving to a new place and how to make the most of them and have a positive experience when you move. So for 15 years, Kathryn has run Thinking People, where she worked with companies in the UK, which enabled her clients to maximize their global opportunities by attracting and retaining their international talent and bridging the cultural gap and creating more cohesive teams. Then in 2015, Kathryn moved to Montreal with her family and has used her skills as a coach and facilitator and her experience of global transition to establish her company, Kathryn Relocated, to help inspire and connect and then support expat partners to make the most of their overseas experience before, during, and after their relocation. Now she has launched a new company, Up and Thrive, to continue her work and help companies with their leaders and their teams to thrive globally. So thank you, Kathryn, so much for joining us on Relocate Guru today.
Thank you, Nicole. It's great to have the opportunity.
That's fantastic. So what led you on your journey to start up your business and to go on your transition across the Atlantic?
Okay, so my real first experience of change was when I was 10, and I was moved with my family from Germany, where I was born, to the UK. And looking back, I think that was a real defining moment. How I cope with change and the strategies that I use there are still strategies that I'm kind of working with today, and I'm also using to support others. I then went on to study international development. I worked as a project manager for 7 years, developing projects overseas. And there I was responsible for bringing together teams of people from all over the world to work in a different cultural context, and to successfully deliver those projects. And again, there I became more involved in actually supporting people to think about how they could prepare for change, and make a success of that change.
Fantastic. So, what got you kind of fired up and inspired to focus on like the challenges that expats are having?
Well, that really came with this experience that I've just had here in Montreal. I found that I was engaging with an expat network, and the issues that they were presenting to me were all quite similar. The things that they were talking about, the challenges that they were facing, was all quite similar. And I was able to talk to them and give them some solutions. And they kind of came back to me and said, "Oh, you seem to know about this sort of stuff, Kathryn. What have you done? Would you be willing to kind of support me to do this or this?" And so that's really how Kathryn Relocated grew. It was out of a kind of a particular need that I was identified. And I guess what really excites me is that I'm really interested in inspiring people and really empowering them to embrace change. I think lots of people have a very negative change has quite negative connotations. And but I'm passionate about giving people a real positive experience of change, and not just having a positive experience of that change per se, but actually really using that change as an opportunity to transform and do something different. And I guess I believe that there's many aspects of that, but for me, the two real key things that mean whether somebody has a positive or negative experience of change come from if you can create a really strong sense of belonging, and if you can create a real strong sense of purpose through that change. And if you've got those two working together, then that can be the kind of make or break, I think, for a lot of people.
Definitely. So, what inspired you to do the move to Montreal with your family?
So that really came from. It's quite interesting because everybody says to me, "Oh, did you come here with your husband's job?" And we did, but it was very much led by me. So having worked as an intercultural kind of facilitator for 20 odd years, I was really I was passionate about giving our children really an opportunity to not just holiday somewhere, but to really live somewhere in a different culture, and to feel what it was like to make that change and come and connect and make friends, and that it was possible, and that actually whether they enjoyed it or not, they would have done it, and they would have actually had that experience.
Yeah,
to help them in later life.
And skills as well, sort of like
Yeah.
those skills that you can only learn from actually going through it yourself.
Exactly. So that for me was really important, and they've had a very positive experience, and it's been a fantastic opportunity for all of us. So, job done on that one.
Yeah. What you were talking about, like these different phases of change that we kind of go through, and
Yeah.
I think we can all kind of identify with a lot of these through our lives in the transition.
Yeah.
It comes up. So can you tell us a bit more about it and more about these different phases that we go through?
Yeah, sure. So many people talk about, particularly in kind of cross-cultural work, they talk about this idea of this W curve. But actually, I think it relates to change, whatever kind of change you're undergoing really in your life. You don't have to move from one culture to another. You can just be moving from one place within your own country and still experience these things. Or it might be that it's just a change in career, that there's similarities there. But where we tend to start with is very much this sort of this honeymoon period, so at the top of the W, and that really comes from this idea that if it's a change that you've initiated, or it's a change that you've driven, you kind of, you've made it, you've got there. And I see a lot of that in the entrepreneurs that I work with, who have given up their job to suddenly now work freelance, and it's like, woohoo, I've made it. And that's really where it starts. But that high is inevitably then followed by quite a large low. And that can be a real low point for a lot of people. And people refer to that as culture shock or change shock, and that is really where we're what have I done? That's the sort of where the realization hits. Yeah. And it's kind of, oh my goodness, I didn't really expect this. This is a lot harder than I anticipated. I really miss what I had before. So there's feelings there of loss, which can be quite hard to deal with. And so that tends to be the real low point. But then over time, and what I do want to say is that this adjustment period for everybody is very individual. So, for some it will take a month, for others 6, for others a year. It really depends on the experiences that you've had before, where you're moving from and to, and how big the change is, I guess. But then the next phase is that kind of, we start to get a little bit more clarity. We sort of begin to kind of understand a little bit more about how things work in the new place that we are. We start to make a few more connections. We get a bit more of a routine and begin to feel a little bit more like ourselves. If we're moving from one culture to another, perhaps we get a bit more used to the weather, the food. It's those sorts of changes that become a bit more normal to us. But then we do tend to have then another dip. And that tends to be the sort of anger kind of and depression dip. I use that word loosely, but that's the kind of everything annoys me here. It's kind of like, this doesn't work, and the traffic's really bad, and it's always so you tend to get it's sort of the real frustration starts to sort of kick in at that point.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, why did we ever? It's not that real sadness, I think, that we get initially, but it's just a real frustration, and a kind of more of a kind of, everything is just all fits in a too hard box. Mm-hmm. And that can also lead to issues of isolation. So that feeling of kind of, oh, I made these really good connections at the beginning, but no one really gets me. They don't really understand me. Not like my colleagues, my friends, where I was before. I feel like I'm a bit like from another planet, that kind of sort of concept. And then eventually over time, we kind of get into a bit more of a sort of, we can take the rough with the smooth. Yes, okay, there's still troughs and peaks, like there is in life as we go through, but it becomes your new normal. And actually, okay, there might be blockers in the way, but at that point you have then adjusted, and you've reached a level of acceptance that actually this is the way forward for now. And those are very much the stages, I would say.
Has there been any research or studies sort of saying roughly how long to expect that kind of spectrum to?
Yeah, well, as I say, I mean, I think it really does depend on different people, and how naturally some people are more comfortable with ambiguity than others, and therefore those people tend to be better at change. So personality definitely comes in, and then I think it depends also where you're going to, because obviously if it's highly culturally different, but the more the more you can do at the beginning to prepare yourself, the shorter you're going to make that adjustment period. So if the norm for you is going to be 9 months, then there's potential there to actually shorten it down into 3 months, if you can put some of the strategies that we're going to talk about in place.
Because experiencing the lows it can cause a lot of problems with relationships as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen quite a lot, and it would be good to have some strategies to kind of smooth out those waves that can happen, and just make it a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. And I think being aware that whilst you yourself are going through that cultural adjustment, your partner, your children, whoever it is around you, they're going through their own adjustment too, and they will be doing it at different point to you. So potentially when you hit your hardest, when you hit your bottom, they may not have got there yet. Or they may have already been through it. So I think it's a really useful tool to have in your mind, not just for yourself, but also for others that you're supporting.
Yeah,
being aware where they're at.
Like if you're at your honeymoon period, partner is at their worst, that could cause a bit of friction.
Yeah, because you've got that. Well, it's just one of you's kind of it's fantastic here. I'm loving it, and the other one's like, oh my goodness, it's just not how I thought it was going to be. But I would say for a big thing on that is take time. Just accept that it is a process and it does take time, but it will get easier. But you do need to give yourself that time.
Does that happen if say you were made to move somewhere where you didn't want to go, like you were kind of didn't have much of a choice in the matter? Mm-hmm. Like, do you kind of miss out on that honeymoon phase, or does that just come later through life?
Yeah, I think it's I think you probably do. But I think for me there's something that comes before that, and that is really around the closure of your old life, if you like, to enable you to try and have some honeymoon.
Yeah.
It might not be as high as someone who's really kind of is really driving it, but if we can get closure, if before we even start into the W, we can really work on getting closure on what we did before, then that helps us kind of actually become excited about what we're doing.
So what are the strategies? So we need to get some preparation before we even move to try and minimize that adjustment period. So what would you say that we need to get in place?
Yeah, that would definitely be one of them. I mean, research shows that the more prepared you are for the fact that it's going to be challenging, the better you will manage it, because it doesn't come at you as a shock that this is kind of difficult. And I think however much this is something that you wanted to do forever, or even drive it, like in my experience, to come to here to Montreal, it was still a challenge, and for all the work, I know all the stuff, mentally or cerebrally, I know all the strategies and I know all the things, and yet there was still, I still hit that low. Mm-hmm. So I think being prepared that it is challenging, and you're asking a lot of yourself to do it. Lots of people don't go there. for that very reason.
So is it just kind of like mentally preparing yourself of going like, this is going to be hard, but we're going to be okay?
Yeah, exactly. It's a process, but I'm going to get out the other end, and it's all going to be, and when we do, we'll be able to do what we can. But I think the other kind of, for me, there's a sort of a couple of other things in there, and that is one key thing is about connections and really putting yourself out there, saying yes to everything, being proactive, linking in with people, because that is, you can do that through volunteering, you can do that through meetup groups online, whatever works for you. If you've got school age children, then through the schoolyard, whatever. But that is really, I think, is where you get a great source of local information, which then has a sort of domino effect into other things. It also gets you out of the house, and it engages you with different people, and they may not be the people that 6 months down the line you end up necessarily having a strong friendship with, but they're your initiators. They're the people that get you out and start working, first of all.
That's kind of where I want Relocate Guru to fit in, is to be that signpost of local knowledge where we can kind of gather that knowledge before we've even left home, of going, what do the locals say and where can we meet up, and sort of like make those connections with people before you've even left. So the more people use it, and use it as that kind of almost storage pot to put the pieces of information, where it's which clubs to join, or coffee shops are good, or where the supermarket is, or what forms you need to fill in. You can put in your Relocate Guru folder so that it can then know where you're going before you get.
No, I think that's totally invaluable. Having that kind of information and that connection is really useful. And then I think the other one would be around really developing routines and rituals. So it's kind of, it sounds quite simple, but it's things like waking up at the same time. It's things like having a list of daily things you need to do, or a weekly schedule, or something that's always planned in, and creating kind of, because when you're undergoing so much change, what is useful is to have something that in your life that is consistent. And so by having a routine, even if you're not a particularly routine person, it can just really help when everything else feels like it's spinning. Again, research shows that those people who feel they're in control have a better experience of change, have a more positive experience of change, because human nature is to want to be in control. And so whilst it may only feel like it's a little thing that you're in control of, it can be empowering in that sense.
So even if it's just a coffee date once a week with or a meetup group or something.
Completely, make sure there's something in there that's fun, make sure there's something in there that's interactive. So something that gets you out of your house, gets you out of your environment, and that you enjoy doing. So think of a hobby or a pastime, or something that you've always wanted to do that now you have time for. This is the time to kind of indulge yourself and get out there and do it, because you're doing it for not just for that purpose, but for a bigger purpose, actually.
And that can spark off something else that you were saying. It's like finding your purpose. If you sort of like found that, I've got all this time to start up photography that I've never had time to do before, you can join a photography club, and
exactly,
something that you get really passionate about and goes into your purpose.
And I think the last thing is really about is to do with, well, we sort of come full circle, but it's really about attitude. So it's about, part of the attitude is preparing for it to be challenging, but the other part of the attitude is that kind of be curious, ask questions, be open-minded, and also be kind to yourself. So don't, there's no right or wrong way with this, and what works for one person won't work for the other. And the same with the W curve. It's generally seen that that's the trend that people go through. But if you don't have a honeymoon and a big dip, don't panic. Your way is the right way, and you'll find a way. And do what feels right for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, just kind of having that in the back of your mind is really useful.
Yeah, that's fine. So, were there any other strategies you want to say, or do you want to sort of like talk about what resources that we can access to make it easy?
Kind of, so I mean, there's thousands, hundreds and thousands of websites, podcasts, you name it. But a few that I just kind of probably want to sort of picked out in terms of highlighting, really. Obviously, access Relocate Guru, use that. That's a great source of information, and I think over time, as more people use it, so the information on there will become better and better and better. And so use that as a starting point. Meetup I've already mentioned. I think that's a great, if people aren't familiar with that, that's a great kind of online network, and enables you to engage with groups that have very specific interests, so you can really hone that down. I think in terms of change and kind of getting your head around change, I would recommend The Beauty of Discomfort by Amanda Lang. She talks there about different strategies for change. It's a case study approach, but she uses different strategies for change. And then if you're an expat, if you're going to go as an expat partner, then probably the Bible is the Expat Partner Survival Guide by Claire Wiggins, which is probably the kind of key volume that probably most people recommend and would say. I've also got my own blog. So on my blog, I've tried to write either articles from myself or interviews that I've done with expat partners about their experiences, and I try to do the full circle. So it starts at kind of before and goes all the way through the process right to returning home. So, and there's other links on there to other resources as well.
Fantastic. And yeah, I suppose sort of like when we're in that kind of preparing mode for moving, we tend to focus, we think we don't have enough time to put the energy into actually mentally preparing for the move. We're so busy doing the practical things of organizing the packers and the shipping containers and phoning up everybody and just organizing schools and cars and all the rest of the practical things, banks, and there's a never-ending list.
Yeah,
it's making a conscious decision to looking at the resources of like mentally preparing, like, okay, once all the boxes are unpacked, it's like, well, now what?
Yeah.
So it's making that effort to sort of reach out and see these resources and going, oh, it's not just me that feels this way.
Exactly. And I think even in that madness, even in that, if you can, even in the madness of the pack up and the move, is just try and take 5 minutes with a cup of tea if you can, or a glass of water or whatever it is, but just take kind of 5 or 10 minutes each day just to kind of take stock and catch yourself and think, okay, where am I in all of this? So whether that's a sit on the sofa or whether it's a walk around the block, I think that really pays dividends in the long term and really prevents you getting to that point of just complete overwhelm, which I see so many people in.
I see so much that's sort of like they're buzzing around like busy bees, like the whole time, sort of like whether it's like doing the cleaning and doing the school drop-offs and doing grocery shopping and sort of like just trying to keep everything steady, like on the home front, but spending 5 minutes to work out what they need.
And when you're in this point of transition, I just think it becomes even more key than because you're processing so much information, but trying not to forget about how that feels emotionally, I think is really important.
and then something happens, like, oh, you get a parking ticket in a new country, you have no idea how to deal with it, and you go into another panic mode.
A bit more time, you've just got a bit more resource to respond to that in a way that feels appropriate.
Yeah. Or a medical emergency happens and it's like, I don't know how to deal with the doctors.
Yeah.
Because in the UK you just rock up to a or a GP. It's not the same everywhere else, and it's learning. If you've got some strategies in place to cope with changes, then when something happens, it doesn't kind of overwhelm you quite so much.
Exactly, it doesn't just completely floor you. You've already thought about how you're going to manage that,
and hopefully less checking on Skyscanner for tickets home.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom today. Is there any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we go?
I guess just enjoy the journey. It's an amazing opportunity to be able to have the chance to go and move and experience and be somewhere else. So yeah, take it for what it is and enjoy the journey.
So where can people find out about you and find your resources?
Yeah, sure. So I offer personal coaching through Kathryn Relocated. So you can find me on www.kathrynrelocated.com, or you can follow me on my Facebook page, and you'll also find me on Instagram on there too. So hopefully one of those three ways you'll find me.
And we'll put all the links in the comments below, so you can join in the conversation down there. And also I want to start a conversation today about what strategies worked for you when you relocated somewhere new. If there are any tips that you would like to share with somebody else who's about to embark on their journey, please pop them in the comments and we can discuss sort of what different strategies that we haven't thought of yet to make the whole process easier. So I'd love to hear what you think and what worked for you. So have a great day, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the Facebook group in the chat below. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
In our community to feel at home anywhere.